The drive to rural Tennessee had been long and filled with thoughts that Sarah Mitchell tried to avoid. The rain drummed steadily against the car's windows as she arrived in the small, quiet town, searching for a new beginning. It wasn't much, a scattering of modest buildings, a single grocery store, and a local diner that looked like it hadn't changed in decades. Yet, there was something oddly comforting about its simplicity. She pulled up to her rented house, a modest white bungalow with faded shutters and an overgrown lawn. Sarah stepped out into the drizzle, feeling the cool, damp air wrap around her. It was a sharp contrast to the warmth she once knew, a reminder of the cold void left behind by her husband's sudden death in a car accident just 6 months prior. The inside of the house was just as she'd left it during her quick visit a week before: bare walls, a few mismatched pieces of furniture, and stacks of unpacked boxes. Among them, one stood out. It was labeled Andrew's Things, filled with remnants of her husband's life that she couldn't yet bear to sort through. The air inside the house felt heavy, as if laden with memories that weren't hers yet demanded her attention. With a sigh, she dropped her keys on the kitchen counter and looked out the window at the town below, now shrouded in a gray mist. She hoped the move would be a step toward healing, but it was still too soon to tell. Her heart was burdened by more than grief, it was burdened by uncertainty. Uncertain of where life would take her now, uncertain if she would ever feel whole again. That evening, Sarah sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the drizzle turn into a gentle rain. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a small step in a journey that she hoped would eventually bring a sense of peace. Jack Thompson's cabin stood at the edge of a thick forest, its isolation a testament to the life he had chosen. His mornings were as unchanging as the mountains that surrounded him. He rose early, the routine almost automatic, brewing coffee, fixing a simple breakfast, and sitting in his worn leather chair on the front porch. The cabin was humble but sturdy, reflecting Jack's personality. It was cluttered with relics of the past, a collection of old military gear, a few framed photographs, and a shelf filled with books on survival tactics. One photo, however, stood out among the rest, a faded image of Jack and his late wife, Emma, taken on their honeymoon. He kept it in the living room, a reminder of a life that seemed almost too distant to be real. This morning, Jack decided to make a rare trip into town for supplies. He wasn't fond of crowds, even in this small community, but he couldn't avoid the necessities. He drove into town, his old truck rattling along the dirt road, and parked in front of the general store. As he stepped inside, the familiar scent of dusty shelves and coffee filled the air. The locals knew Jack, but only as a man of few words. He was greeted with nods and polite hellos, to which he responded in kind. He quickly picked up what he needed: coffee, bread, canned soup, and headed to the register. It was then that he overheard two women whispering about a newcomer. She's staying in the old Jenkins place. Poor widow, lost her husband not too long ago. Jack felt a strange pang of recognition, a sense of shared sorrow that caught him off guard. He pushed the feeling aside and paid for his groceries, determined to keep his distance from the past he was trying to forget. He returned to his cabin, where the isolation felt both safe and suffocating, a fragile balance he had learned to live with. The local bookstore was one of the few places in town where Sarah felt a flicker of comfort. It was a small, cozy space, filled with the scent of old paper and freshly brewed coffee from the adjoining cafe. Today, a poetry reading event was being held, and though Sarah wasn't one for crowds, she felt an unexpected pull to attend. Maybe it was the promise of hearing words that resonated with her inner turmoil, words that might offer some sense of understanding. She arrived early and found a seat near the back, away from the small gathering of locals. The readers, mostly amateur poets, recited lines about love, heartbreak, and healing. One poem, however, caught Sarah off guard. It spoke of finding peace amidst loss, and it stirred something deep within her. She felt a sudden lump in her throat, a raw reminder of her own pain. Just then she noticed a man standing by the shelves, listening intently. He was tall, with rugged features that seemed both strong and tired. He caught her glance, and for a moment their eyes locked. An unexpected connection, brief but strangely familiar. Sarah quickly looked away, embarrassed by her reaction. The reading continued, but she found it hard to focus, her thoughts lingering on the stranger. After the event ended, Sarah wandered through the shelves, not quite ready to leave. She stopped at a section of poetry books, her fingers grazing over the spines. To her surprise, the man from earlier approached her, holding a thin volume in his hand. "If you like that poem, you might find this one helpful," he said, his voice low and gentle. It was a book of poems about healing after loss, something he seemed to know a lot about. Sarah hesitated, unsure how to respond. "Thank you," she managed, taking the book from him. "I've been trying to find words that fit everything." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes words help. Sometimes they don't. But it's worth a try." There was an awkward silence, filled with the weight of unspoken stories. "I'm Sarah," she said, finally breaking the tension. "I just moved here." "Jack," he replied simply. "Been here a while." They exchanged a few more words, simple, tentative. There was a sense of shared sorrow between them, an unspoken acknowledgement that both were trying to heal from wounds still too fresh to fully reveal. Before Sarah left, Jack offered a small smile. "Take care," he said, his voice rough but kind. As she stepped outside, Sarah clutched the book to her chest, feeling the rain begin to fall again. There was a strange sense of possibility in the air, mixed with fear. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her consider the idea of moving forward, even if she wasn't sure where it would lead. Over the following weeks, Sarah and Jack found themselves crossing paths more often. It was as if the small town conspired to bring them together. Whether it was at the local diner, during a morning walk along the river, or while picking up groceries, their meetings felt increasingly natural. Each encounter was a small, tentative step toward a bond neither had planned for. One Saturday morning, as Sarah walked through the town square, she noticed Jack sitting on a bench, sipping coffee from a thermos. He caught her eye and waved her over. "Care to join me?" he asked, his expression warm but guarded. Sarah hesitated, then nodded, taking a seat beside him. "It's a nice day for a walk," she said, her voice a bit brighter than usual. Jack nodded. "It is. Peaceful." He paused for a moment before adding, "I've been meaning to thank you for the book suggestion. It helped?" Sarah smiled faintly. "Words have that power sometimes, don't they?" As the days passed, their conversations grew deeper. They shared stories from their pasts, the kind that revealed more than surface details. Sarah talked about her teaching career in the city, recalling how literature had always been her escape from reality. Jack, in turn, opened up about his time in the military, the camaraderie he missed, and the burden of memories that still haunted him. "You know," Jack said one afternoon as they walked along a wooded path near the edge of town, "sometimes I feel like I'm still fighting a war. Only now it's in my head." Sarah stopped walking, her eyes softening. "I think I understand," she said quietly. "I feel like I'm still trying to save Andrew, even though I know I can't." There was a moment of shared vulnerability, the kind that doesn't require words. Jack reached out and gently touched Sarah's hand. It was a small, cautious gesture, but it spoke volumes. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt a flicker of warmth, a sign that maybe, just maybe, her heart was capable of feeling again. But not everything was so easily mended. There were moments when both retreated, caught up in their own lingering doubts. One evening, Sarah invited Jack over for dinner. It was a simple meal, pasta, salad, and wine, but it felt like a significant step. They laughed over stories of childhood mishaps and shared their love for books, with Sarah quoting lines from her favorite authors and Jack listening with a mix of admiration and curiosity. Yet, as the night drew on, the conversation took a more somber turn. "I never really got to say goodbye to Emma," Jack admitted, his voice low. "It was sudden. One moment she was there, the next, gone." Sarah reached across the table, covering Jack's hand with hers. "I know how that feels," she whispered. "It's the not knowing that haunts you." They sat in silence for a moment, holding on to the shared understanding that, despite their progress, there were still wounds that needed time to heal. The moment was heavy, but it also carried a hint of hope, a sense that, together, they could at least try to find peace. As Jack left that evening, he turned to Sarah at the door. "Thank you for tonight," he said sincerely. "It was nice." Sarah nodded, her eyes meeting his. "It was. Maybe we can do it again sometime?" "Yeah," Jack said, smiling slightly. "Maybe we can." The warmth between Sarah and Jack grew steadily, but so did the complexity of their emotions. It was as if the more they opened up to each other, the more vulnerable they felt. One evening, as Sarah was reorganizing the old boxes she'd left untouched since moving, she stumbled upon a worn leather-bound journal. It belonged to Andrew, her late husband. Curiosity mixed with hesitation as she sat on the floor and opened the journal. Inside were pages filled with Andrew's handwriting, letters he had written but never sent, revealing secrets that Sarah never knew. He had been struggling with personal issues she was unaware of, carrying guilt and hidden regrets about choices he made in his career and personal life. The discoveries were overwhelming, casting a shadow over the idealized memories Sarah had been holding onto. Deeply shaken, Sarah closed the journal abruptly. The revelations made her question everything she thought she knew about Andrew, and she felt a surge of betrayal mingled with sorrow. Her instinct was to retreat, to hide her grief from Jack, who was becoming someone she was afraid of losing as well. Meanwhile, Jack was facing his own ghosts. One afternoon, while he was working on repairs at the cabin, an unexpected visitor arrived. Mark Daniels, an old comrade from his military days. Mark's presence was unsettling, bringing back memories Jack had long buried. "You disappeared, Jack," Mark said, his voice a mix of frustration and concern. "We needed you after everything that happened in the field." Jack felt a wave of guilt rise up inside him. "I couldn't stay," he admitted, his voice rough. "I lost Emma and it was too much." Mark's visit reopened old wounds, making Jack confront the unresolved guilt over surviving battles that others hadn't, and the pain of not being there for his comrades after Emma's death. It was a burden he hadn't shared with Sarah, and it weighed heavily on his heart. As both Sarah and Jack grappled with the unexpected re-emergence of their pasts, a distance began to grow between them. Their conversations became shorter, filled with hesitations and lingering silences. Sarah, torn by the revelations in Andrew's journal, wondered if she could truly open herself to Jack, while Jack, haunted by the past, struggled with the fear of not being enough for someone like Sarah. One evening, Sarah made an attempt to speak openly. "I found something of Andrew's," she said, her voice trembling. "It's made me question a lot." Jack nodded slowly, understanding her hesitation. "Mark showed up today," he admitted, his own voice strained. "Brought back things I thought I'd left behind." The weight of their respective revelations hung heavy in the air. It was clear that the past still had a firm hold on both of them. Yet, beneath the fear and uncertainty, there remained a quiet hope that maybe, by facing these shadows together, they could finally start to heal. The weather had been unpredictable all week, with dark clouds looming over the small town. On a particularly stormy evening, an urgent call spread quickly among the townspeople. A young child, Megan, had gone missing in the nearby woods. The news triggered a surge of panic, and within minutes, a search party was formed. Despite the pouring rain and treacherous conditions, Jack didn't hesitate. The ex-soldier in him took over as he grabbed a flashlight, some rope, and headed straight into the woods. Sarah watched as he sprinted past her house, his silhouette barely visible against the dark sky. She felt a mix of fear and admiration. Jack was willing to risk everything for a stranger's child. The storm intensified, with wind gusts rattling the branches overhead. Jack pushed through the dense foliage, calling out for Megan. His heart pounded, a mix of adrenaline and painful memories, but he kept moving. He wasn't going to let another life slip away, not if he could help it. Meanwhile, Sarah, despite her fear of the storm, joined the other searchers at the edge of the woods. Her heart raced as she thought about Jack's determination. She knew what the rescue meant to him, not just saving the child but also confronting his own demons. After what felt like hours, Jack spotted a small figure huddled near a fallen tree. It was Megan, shivering and crying. "Hey, I've got you," Jack said gently, wrapping his coat around her. "You're safe now." The journey back was slow and arduous, with Jack carrying Megan securely in his arms. His legs ached and the cold rain stung his skin, but the child's safety was all that mattered. As he emerged from the woods, soaked and exhausted, the sight of the relieved search party, including Sarah, filled him with a sense of accomplishment he hadn't felt in years. Sarah rushed toward him, her face wet with tears and rain. "You did it," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. Jack nodded, his expression softened by a rare vulnerability. "I couldn't let her be lost," he said simply. In that moment, their eyes locked with a new depth of understanding. It wasn't just Megan who had been found. Both Jack and Sarah felt a part of themselves begin to heal, even if it meant facing the storms within. The storm had passed, leaving the small town soaked but intact. In the days following Megan's rescue, the community rallied around Jack, praising his bravery. But Jack wasn't one for attention. He was just grateful that Megan was safe and that he had finally proven something to himself. Sarah couldn't stop thinking about that night. It wasn't just the act of rescue that had moved her, it was the courage Jack had shown in facing both physical danger and his internal battles. She realized that, despite her fears, she wanted to be with him, to truly be with him beyond the shadows of their pasts. One quiet afternoon, Sarah found herself standing at Jack's doorstep. She took a deep breath and knocked. When he opened the door, she saw a mix of surprise and warmth in his eyes. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Jack nodded, stepping aside to let her in. They sat together on his small, worn sofa, the air heavy with unspoken words. "I've been thinking a lot," Sarah began. "About everything, Andrew, the secrets I found and the doubts they brought up. It made me realize that I've been holding on to an idealized version of him, something that wasn't real. I need to let that go if I ever want to move forward. Jack listened intently, sensing the weight of her confession. I understand, he said quietly. When Emma died, I felt like I lost my chance to make things right, not just with her but with my own choices. I've been stuck in that place for too long. The honesty in Jack's voice broke down Sarah's final barriers. Maybe we can both let go, she said softly. Together. There was a moment of silence, filled with possibility. Then Jack reached out and took Sarah's hand, his grip firm but gentle. I'd like that, he admitted, his eyes sincere. But I need you to know that I'm still figuring things out. We both are, Sarah replied, her voice calm and reassuring. And that's okay. Over the following weeks, their relationship blossomed. It wasn't perfect. There were still difficult conversations, moments of vulnerability, and times when the past threatened to intrude. But now they faced it all as a team, supporting each other through the process of healing. One sunny morning, Jack invited Sarah to plant a small tree in her backyard. An apple tree, a symbol of growth, hope, and new beginnings. As they dug the hole and placed the sapling in the ground, they laughed at the mess they made and at the simple joy of creating something together. As they stood back to admire their work, Jack turned to Sarah, his eyes soft but full of determination. No more hiding, he said. Sarah smiled, tears of relief and happiness glistening in her eyes. No more hiding, she agreed. They shared a tender kiss under the clear sky, knowing that, despite the uncertainties ahead, they were finally ready to embrace the future, together.